The sun hung low, bathing the highway in a soft, golden light, as Camila adjusted her tactical vest, taking her post at the Federal Highway Police checkpoint. Beside her, Thor, her K-9 partner, stood unusually alert. His ears were pricked, his eyes sharp, his body rigid, as if he knew, long before she did, that this shift would not be like the others. The two of them had seen everything on these Minas Gerais roads, but there was something in the morning air that years of experience couldn't quite name. A few cars, a pickup, and a bus passed through. Each was stopped, quickly checked, and sent on its way. The traffic was lighter than usual, yet Thor never took his eyes off the pavement, as if he were waiting for something only he could perceive. Camila tried to stay loose, but she felt a knot of tension tightening in her chest. Then, emerging slowly from the fog-shrouded curves ahead, a large white truck appeared. Its license plates were so caked in mud, they were impossible to read. Camila raised a hand, signaling the driver to pull over. She didn't hesitate. It was an instinctual decision, the kind she made on autopilot when something didn't feel right. The driver's posture, the way the truck seemed out of place on this route, it all felt subtly wrong, even without a clear reason. At her gesture, Thor's focus sharpened to a fine point. He took a half-step forward, straining to approach the vehicle before she had even finished the motion. The hairs on Camilla's arms stood on end. She walked toward the truck, her eyes scanning every detail. The mud climbing halfway up the doors, a strange rattle in the engine, the tightly sealed windows. It all created the impression that there was more to this scene than met the eye. She asked for the driver's papers, watching for any sign of hesitation. The man seemed nervous, his answers clipped, his hands gripping the steering wheel. Camila shot a quick glance at Thor, who was now sniffing the air intently, as if he had caught a foreign scent, something dangerous that didn't belong in the calm of the morning. All signs pointed to the start of a story far from the ordinary, and Thor's premonition only solidified her own. The truck braked slowly, groaning under its weight as it pulled up beside an orange cone. Camila watched its every move, Thor at her side, more vigilant than ever. The moment the truck came to a complete stop, he erupted into a loud, ceaseless barking, his gaze fixed on the rear cargo bay. The sound was so urgent that everyone nearby, other officers, drivers waiting in line, turned to see what was happening. It was as if Thor knew something was hidden inside, something that could not be ignored. The truck door creaked open reluctantly, and a woman named Samara emerged. She climbed down with a firm expression, showing no sign of nerves or irritation. In fact, her calm was almost overdone, as if each movement had been carefully rehearsed. Camila noticed it immediately. This wasn't the ease of someone used to routine stops. It was the forced composure of someone trying to maintain control when everything was slipping away. Samara stepped down carefully and stood beside the truck, crossing her arms over her chest. When asked what she was transporting, she gave short, evasive answers, her eyes cast toward the ground. Thor did not relax. On the contrary, his barking intensified every time he looked at the cargo bay, a desperate attempt to signal that the danger was right there. The other officers at the checkpoint were now on high alert, exchanging wary, questioning glances. This was a stark departure from a routine inspection, and Camila knew from experience that the biggest cases were always found in the smallest, almost invisible details. The entire mood of the checkpoint had shifted. Even the wind seemed to feel colder as Samara hesitated to answer the request to open the cargo compartment. Thor, with his frantic barks and his unblinking stare fixed on the door, only confirmed it. There was more than just merchandise in there. Feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders, Camilla discreetly signaled for a colleague to approach as she prepared for a thorough search. The tension was so thick now that no one could deny it. That truck was holding a secret, and no one there was willing to pretend this was just another ordinary morning on the road. Camilla watched Samara's every move, the silence between them heavy and palpable, as if one wrong step could cause the entire situation to detonate. Years of long nights and difficult calls had taught Camila to trust her instincts as much as her training. She kept one hand resting near her holster, not as a threat, but as a quiet statement that she was ready for anything. As Samara fumbled in her bag for the documents, her forced calm began to feel unnervingly strange. Finally, she handed over the paperwork. Camilla scanned the driver's license, the vehicle registration, and then, with extra care, the cargo manifest. It took only a few seconds to see the problem. There was no record of what the truck was supposed to be carrying. It was just a crumpled form with empty fields, offering no justification for why the vehicle was on the road at all. When questioned, Samara stammered. First, she said she was on her way to pick up a load of furniture. Then, her voice dropping, she changed her story to agricultural products, avoiding Camila's gaze. Each explanation sounded more improvised than the last. Thor, sensing the shift, continued to pace anxiously near the cargo bay, alternating between barks and deep sniffs along the metal siding. That was it. Every internal alarm in Camilla's mind began to scream. She recalled old stories from fellow officers, tales of seemingly empty trucks hiding dangerous secrets. She remembered her training, which was crystal clear. When the story doesn't add up and the K-9 alerts, that's where the real danger lies. Without further hesitation, she motioned for another officer to keep an eye on the driver and gave the order for an immediate search of the compartment. The atmosphere, once just routine, was now charged with suspense. Other drivers, stopped further back, noticed the heightened activity, and some began filming with their phones. Focused and braced for a surprise, Camila knew the stop had entered a new phase. This was no longer about a traffic violation. It was about ensuring the safety of everyone there. With the tension mounting, Camila wasted no more time. "Open the cargo bay," she commanded, her tone firm. Samara began to hedge, claiming she'd lost the key, that the lock was always jamming, the kind of flimsy excuse that rang false. Her growing nervousness, combined with Thor's behavior, only strengthened Camilla's resolve. The dog was now barking with a different kind of urgency, a deep, loaded sound that anyone who worked with K-9s would recognize as a serious alert. Camila understood her partner's signals perfectly. Thor never got this agitated without a significant reason. Faced with the driver's non-compliance, Camila decided she had waited long enough. She keyed the radio on her shoulder and called for immediate backup from the main post up the road. She couldn't afford to take any chances, not with the history of these roads, and not with the frightened look in Samara's eyes, which now darted away from every officer. While they waited, Camila circled the truck, looking for any physical clues, fresh scratches, handprints, or improvised locks. She knew that the truth often lay not in what was said, but in the small, overlooked details. Thor stayed with her, sniffing every seam and panel, pausing occasionally to look back at her, as if urging her not to give up. The ambient noise of the highway faded into a tense silence, thick with expectation. Though she found no obvious signs on the exterior, Camilla could feel it. This truck was hiding something far beyond the ordinary. The fear that crept in wasn't just about a potential bust. It was the almost primal feeling of facing the unknown. The very air seemed to have grown heavier, and with each passing second, suspicion hardened into a silent certainty. Something was deeply wrong here, and it was about to be revealed. Time seemed to crawl, each minute stretching into an eternity. The morning wind picked up, kicking dust across the asphalt. Samara remained on the truck's step, her arms crossed, her expression a rigid mask of calm. But her eyes, fixed on the distant horizon, betrayed the worry she fought to conceal. With every approaching officer, with every sharp bark from Thor, she seemed to be calculating 1,000 impossible escapes. The other officers had now formed a silent perimeter around the truck, communicating with subtle glances and practiced gestures. They had learned long ago to trust the instincts of a K-9, especially when Camilla's partner was reacting with such conviction. The cargo bay, once an unremarkable container, was now the focal point of the entire scene, drawing all the energy of the checkpoint toward it. Camila didn't need words to know Thor was onto something certain. They had worked together for years, and their synergy went far beyond training. It was as if one could complete the other's thoughts. She knew that he could sense the slightest change in scent, sound, or movement long before any human could. And right now, every fiber of his being was screaming danger. Even as the driver said nothing more, her nervousness radiated in the silences. Camilla noted every detail. The way Samara's fingers dug into her arms, the bead of sweat tracing a path down her temple, the quick, furtive glances in the side mirror. That forced placidity only made it clearer that something was about to break. The cargo bay no longer seemed like just metal and paint. It felt like a container for a volatile secret, one that threatened to burst out at the slightest provocation, making every decision from here on out a delicate one. The agony of the weight intensified as the officers took turns working on the lock. Using improvised tools, they pried and prodded, trying to break it open without causing too much damage. Camilla watched them closely, her hand on her radio, ready to call for more support. Thor remained still by the rear of the truck, his body coiled as tight as a spring, his eyes never leaving the door, as if he could see right through the metal. Each metallic clank amplified the tension. Drivers who had pulled over on the far side of the highway watched from a distance, their faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. No one spoke. The only sounds were the scraping of tools and Thor's short, anxious barks. Then, with a final, forceful twist, the lock gave way with a sharp crack. The door was slowly slid open, its movement creating a low, groaning sound. Everyone tensed, expecting to see illegal goods, hidden bundles, anything that would explain the situation. Instead, what they saw was a gleaming, empty space. The interior was so immaculately clean and well lit that for a moment, it confused them. There were no tire marks, no dust, no scraps of paper, nothing. Just a polished metal floor and walls that showed no signs of use. A few of the officers exchanged looks of doubt, their expressions suggesting they might have overreacted. But Camilla wasn't convinced. Neither was Thor. He remained fixed in his spot, still on high alert, as if the danger hadn't vanished when the door opened. The pristine emptiness of the cargo bay was more alarming than any hidden contraband would have been. Camilla circled the interior, her eyes meticulously scanning for false floors, secret compartments, or any sign of modification. The trail might seem cold to an untrained eye, but she knew the weight of these small signs. She knew, from her partner's unyielding focus and from Samara's evasive behavior, that the mystery was far from over. This apparent nothingness was only the first layer being peeled back. Samara was now leaning against the truck, her arms uncrossed, her posture a mix of defiance and mockery. The corner of her mouth pulled into a faint smirk, as if to say, "Go ahead and look. You'll never find it." Her gaze met Camilla's for a long moment, in a silent challenge, a game as old as the asphalt they stood on. On one side, a well-kept secret. On the other, the relentless determination to uncover the impossible. Even facing an empty truck, Camila did not lower her guard. Her gaze swept over the interior of the compartment again, this time with even greater attention. The floor, polished to a mirror shine, was the first thing that caught her eye. It was clean, as if it had never seen a speck of road dust. The walls, too, were flawless, without a single scratch. A stark contrast for a truck that was supposed to haul cargo for hundreds of kilometers along the highways of Minas Gerais. It was as if someone had spent hours, perhaps even days, scrubbing away every last trace of evidence. But for Camila, this was just another reason to suspect that something was wrong, something hidden in every sterilized inch of that space. Meanwhile, Thor had stopped barking. He was growling, a low, almost whispered sound that could send a shiver down the spine of anyone, even those unaccustomed to police dogs. Just by observing his posture, it was clear the danger hadn't passed. It was just waiting to be discovered. Camila, knowing her partner well, knew he only acted this way when he smelled fear, or when he sensed something was exactly where it couldn't be seen. The silence in the cargo bay, which had once seemed like a resolution, now became another mystery. Everyone around grew restless. The officers looked from Samara to Camila and Thor. Some were already pulling out flashlights, searching for any sign of a false bottom, a loose panel, any clue, no matter how small. Uncertainty settled over the scene, replaced by a profound doubt about what to do next. It was a strange sensation, as if all their efforts only raised more questions, making it clear that when everything seems too clean and too perfect, that's precisely where the most dangerous secrets lie. Camila decided it was time to look beyond appearances. She wouldn't be fooled by an impeccably clean compartment or a driver feigning tranquility. She called over the most experienced agents and ordered a top-to-bottom search of the truck. No rushing, with heightened attention to any unusual detail. The order was met with grim seriousness. No one there wanted to go home with the feeling of a mistake, of an oversight. They grabbed flashlights, inspection mirrors, and even small tools, determined to dismantle the illusion of this flawless emptiness. Samara was beginning to look uncomfortable. She wrung her hands, her eyes darted from side to side. She muttered a few stray words, trying to hurry the process along, saying it was getting late and she had to get to Uberlandia. But every impatient gesture only deepened their suspicions. Her composure was impossible to maintain. The mask of self-confidence, which had seemed unshakable just minutes before, began to crack with every light tap of an officer's hand on the metal paneling, every beam of light illuminating a different corner of the truck. Her expression shifted far too quickly for someone who claimed to have nothing to fear. The agents scoured everything. They ran mirrors along the cracks in the floor, inspected the lining, tested the panels and bolts on the ceiling, and even used batons to feel for any hollow compartments behind the walls. The noise of their tools and the sharp glare of their flashlights created a tense, almost suffocating atmosphere. Suspicion hung in the air like smoke, seeping into everyone present. No corner was left unchecked, and with each negative finding, the doubt only grew. The feeling persisted that something was there, but invisible, as if the truck itself were hiding a secret that went far beyond the physical. Camila, noticing that time was passing and they had found nothing concrete, asked one of her colleagues to pull up Samara's record on the police system. She wanted to know if that self-assured posture really belonged to someone with a clean slate. Thor, lying near the rear wheel, just stared intently at the driver, as if he could see in her the missing piece of the puzzle. While she waited for the radio response, Camilla took a few steps onto the dirt shoulder, feeling the weight of trusting her own instincts when everything around her seemed like a puzzle missing its most crucial piece. The radio crackled, breaking the heavy tension that had settled over the roadside. The voice from dispatch, calm but firm, delivered information that no one there had expected to hear so soon. Samara's name, previously just that of another driver at the police checkpoint, now appeared linked to records of irregular transport. There were sporadic reports of trips with no clear data on cargo or destination, always crossing the smaller roads of Minas Gerais. Nothing was officially proven, but all those notations cast a shadow that was hard to ignore. A chill ran down Camilla's spine. Her instincts had been screaming that this was no routine stop, and now it all made sense. She began to connect the dots. The excessively clean cargo bay, Samara's nervousness, Thor's obstinate focus, and now a history that, taken together, painted a picture of something far more serious than a simple traffic violation. This wasn't just about checking documents or seeing if the driver had gotten enough sleep. It felt like they had stumbled upon a suspicious route used for something large and hidden, and this stop might be the missing link needed to unravel much more. Increasingly cornered and without convincing arguments, Samara could no longer maintain her air of control. Her gaze shifted away. She avoided answering questions directly, and any attempt to feign calmness now rang false. She was no longer the center of attention, but a person on the defensive, sensing that her secrets were on the verge of becoming news. While the other agents intensified their search, Thor remained glued to Samara's side. The dog made no scene. He just held a firm stance, his gaze fixed, as if telling her that this whole story of invisibility was over. It was as if he knew that the key to this investigation was standing right there, sweating, caught between unanswered questions and suspicious glares. For Camila, the case had already changed, and it was now impossible to ignore. There was something serious hidden in that truck, and she was ready to see it through to the end, even if the danger was disguised as just another ordinary day on the road. Before anyone could even catch their breath, the patrol car's radio erupted with an urgent message, drowning out the sound of the wind. The voice from dispatch sounded breathless, reporting a serious incident. A truck had been hijacked a few hours earlier in the Uberaba region, with a kidnapping linked to the robbery. A second of silence fell as the agents processed the license plate details. It only took a few moments for confirmation to arrive. The plates on the truck, parked on the shoulder, were an exact match to those in the incident report. Shock washed over Camilla's face. Her heart hammered in her chest. Thoughts raced in a whirlwind of urgency, and everything clicked into place with terrifying clarity. They weren't just dealing with a nervous driver and an overly clean truck. This was all a facade for something much larger, part of a dangerous and well-orchestrated plan. The pieces of the puzzle, which had seemed so disconnected, finally formed the image of a carefully laid trap, designed to deceive patrols, fellow officers, and even the curious drivers who had passed by hours earlier. Immediately, Camila raised her hand, signaling the agents to be on high alert. The atmosphere grew even heavier. Now, every one of Thor's reactions took on a new meaning. Each quiet growl sounded like confirmation of a real threat, hidden beneath Samara's false innocence. The dog seemed to have known from the very beginning that a major crime was unfolding right under their noses. Amid this turbulent scene, Camila understood that the investigation had moved beyond anything simple or contained. This case was just the beginning of a narrative where the lines between right and wrong are more blurred than ever. Samara's shadowy past, combined with the kidnapping, made her not just a suspect, but a central piece in this plot. It was impossible to predict the next step without feeling a mix of anxiety and fear of the consequences. Now everything was connected. The suspicion born from behavior, the criminal history, the dog's keen senses, and a hidden truth waiting to be revealed under the intense heat of the Minas Gerais highway. With the dispatch call still echoing in everyone's mind, Camila made a quick decision. She approached Samara, her gaze firm, and spoke clearly, almost in a whisper, so as not to alarm the onlookers who were beginning to gather farther down the road. She said she knew about the robbery, she knew about the kidnapping, and she asked if the woman wanted to cooperate, to tell her side of the story before things got even more complicated. The question hung heavy in the air, cutting through the distant rumble of trucks and the morning heat. Samara, however, did not back down. She bit her lip, straightened her stained shirt, and replied flatly that she didn't know anything about it. Her voice was dry, almost sullen. But despite her apparent rigidity, her nervousness was impossible to hide. Her hands trembled as she tried to clasp them. Her eyes kept darting back to Thor, who remained close, watching her every move. Camila knew that no matter how much Samara tried to keep up appearances, she was cornered. This was her last chance to show any remorse, but she clung to her story as if believing it, with her eyes closed, could change what was about to happen. The tension stretched. Each second felt longer than the last, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath, as if the road and everyone on it were waiting for the final word from dispatch. The other officers stood by, some exchanging quick glances, ready for anything. Thor's silent but imposing presence made it clear that no movement would go unnoticed. The dog was more than a partner. He was a living alarm, a sign that at any moment, everything could change on that stretch of asphalt. Samara looked around, perhaps searching for an escape, but found only determined faces and nowhere to run. Camila stood her ground, making it plain. Cooperation was her only chance to leave this scene without making her situation far worse. Time seemed to stretch infinitely until the radio crackled again, bringing with it the certainty of the crime. The castle of lies Samara had built was teetering, threatening to collapse and expose the truth. Betting on the shadows was a mistake when instinct and chance decided to walk side by side on that forgotten patch of highway. When the radio finally brought the confirmation, the message was short, direct, and final, as if everyone had been expecting it. Plate confirmed, truck stolen. The driver forcibly removed the real owner. It was all orchestrated by a gang. That single sentence erased any lingering doubt. Camila, despite her years of experience with strange encounters on the road, felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She now knew for certain that she had been following the right instinct from the very beginning. The other officers moved quickly. Without shouting, but with quiet determination, they surrounded Samara, closing off any possibility of escape. Her demeanor changed instantly. There was no more room to feign strength or try to convince anyone of anything. The silence that had been so full of tension just moments before was now different, filled with the sound of boots on gravel and the click of handcuffs being secured around her wrists. Samara felt defeated, not when she heard the dispatch, But when she saw that no one looked away, that everyone knew exactly who she was, there was no more space for her fabricated story, only the consequences. During the arrest, Thor stopped growling and even stepped back a little, as if he understood his part was done. It wasn't just a matter of training. It was the kind of silent understanding that exists between officers and their K-9 partners, an instinct for wrongdoing that no amount of coursework can teach. Camila crouched down to give Thor a quick, discreet pat, a silent gesture of gratitude. The bond between them was stronger than any manual or conversation. It was the trust of knowing, deep down, when something is truly out of place. The agents' movements became lighter. Some began jotting down plate numbers, others collected their flashlights, and one was already on the phone with the team in Uberaba, reporting the end of the search and requesting backup for the recovery of the stolen truck. And yet, even with Samara in cuffs and the case all but closed, no one spoke loudly or celebrated. A deep respect hung in the air for what had just happened, for the teamwork, and especially for the sharp instinct that had unraveled a web of lies on an ordinary morning in the heart of Minas Gerais. As the final details of the report were being filed and Samara remained in custody, a car from the civil police arrived, bringing the truck's real owner. Donna Marley, a woman in her early 50s, stepped slowly out of the back seat, supported by a female officer. Her face bore the signs of sleepless nights, the marks of someone who had spent hours staring down fear and uncertainty. Her hair was haphazardly tied back, her clothes were stained with dust and sweat, and her eyes were fixed on everything around her, as if trying to grasp that she was truly free, here on this lost highway. When Marley saw Samara standing among the agents, there was no hesitation. She stopped, looked the criminal in the eye, and pointed without raising her voice. The truth, laid bare, left no room for doubt. Even those who had watched the entire process in silence felt the weight of that moment. The confirmation, after all, came not just from paperwork or the radio. It was clear, human, and impossible to deny when the victim herself was standing right there, despite her fear. In that moment, relief washed over some, but for most, it was another jolt of reality. Camila, especially, realized just how exposed they had all been. The risk had been far greater than she'd imagined at the start of the takedown. A single overlooked detail, and the outcome would have been entirely different. That realization struck a deep chord in everyone there. This wasn't just about catching a criminal. It was about understanding how easily ordinary people could be ensnared in such schemes, and how everything could change in seconds on any given highway. After identifying Samara, Marley didn't say much. She gave Camila a quick, almost strengthless embrace, a simple gesture that conveyed both gratitude and profound relief. For the first time, Samara offered no resistance. She stood quietly, head bowed, accepting her fate. The fight was gone, replaced by the quiet acknowledgement that her deception had ended, right there, in front of them all. The truck's trailer, now open and stripped of its secrets, looked mundane, bearing no trace of the mystery that had shrouded the tense morning. Camila understood, with a tightness in her chest, that her priority now was to comfort and care for the victim. The crime could be unraveled later. In that moment, all that mattered was giving Donna Marley a chance to begin again, even if it was just in the shadow of a roadside. After ensuring a specialized team would look after Donna Marley and her family, Camila watched as Samara was led to the patrol car, too drained to even protest. The sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the shoulder of the road. The sirens fell silent, and the highway that had felt so menacing earlier now seemed ordinary, almost monotonous, as if nothing extraordinary had happened at all. There, in the early afternoon light, Camila walked back to where it all began, feeling the heavy relief of a vital task completed. Her every step was accompanied by the muffled conversations of her colleagues. Some were exchanging impressions, others remarking on Donna Marley's courage or Thor's flawless work. The dog trotted beside her, his tail held a little higher, receiving praise and a few furtive pats. It had been a grueling day for everyone, but no one missed the chance to praise the dog's contribution, as if he were a symbol of hope amid the tension that always hangs over such situations. It didn't take long for the story to spread. Within minutes, as they collected cones and checked clipboards, messages were already flooding the department's group chat. Thor and Camila had dismantled a ring and saved a life. Photos of the dog in his reflective vest were being forwarded from phone to phone, some already appearing on the social media profiles of the officers themselves. The recognition, however small and fleeting, helped give meaning to the difficult moments. Those times when the loneliness of the road weighs heavily after a day fraught with uncertainty. Still, Camilla couldn't shake the feeling that this story had more hidden chapters. Perhaps Samara wasn't just a lone piece. Perhaps there were other trucks, other victims, or larger connections that this morning had failed to reveal. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of tranquility. She sat on the curb beside Thor, scratching behind his ears and taking a deep breath, inhaling the strong scent of earth, grease, and heat. It was rare to permit herself such a pause, but she needed it. It was just the two of them, resting for a moment after navigating another danger together, trusting each other in ways they couldn't explain, but knew by heart. Back at the base in Uberaba, the atmosphere was one of quiet celebration. There was no party, but everyone found a way to show their respect for the job done. Colleagues returning from other calls clapped Camilla on the back, offering light-hearted comments to ease the tension that still lingered in the air. In the kennel, Thor was rewarded with special treats and affectionate pats, even receiving a new collar from the team commander. A photo of the pair was pinned to a bulletin board, a handwritten note beside it, congratulating them for keeping their composure in such a complicated situation. Yet, even surrounded by this recognition, Camilla couldn't fully relax. The image of the truck's trailer kept replaying in her mind, that strange emptiness, almost like another code in a larger enigma. It wasn't just curiosity. In her line of work, she knew that very few things happened by chance. The fact that the truck was completely clean, no hiding spots, no cargo, no new clues, left a nagging sense of an unfinished story. Camila mentally replayed every moment of the operation, searching for missed signals, for tiny details that could explain that void. She knew there was no use trying to turn the page until she found an answer. Meanwhile, official commendations began to arrive. There was formal praise, collective recognition, and even the promise of extra time off, all signed by the regional command. Camila expressed her thanks with a polite smile, but none of it touched her as deeply as the silent bond she shared with Thor. At the end of her shift, she sat in the courtyard beside the dog, watching the comings and goings of the base. Only here, reflected in Thor's knowing eyes, did she allow herself to lower her guard. As if sensing that the real battle never truly ends, the dog returned her gaze with quiet attention, resting his head on her knee. It was in that moment, in the midst of a silence full of meaning, that Camilla understood. For those who live on the road, rest is only a brief pause. The emptiness of the truck remained, hammering at her thoughts. A stark reminder that where there seems to be too much peace, danger is merely hiding. Sooner or later, it would begin to advance again, right alongside the asphalt. The clock had already struck nearly 11 at night, but Camilla was still in the small office, lit only by the yellow glow of her desk lamp. The voices at the base had fallen silent. Most of her colleagues had gone home or were resting in other sectors. Thor was curled up asleep on a small mattress near the door. But the officer couldn't disconnect from the question that had been tormenting her all day. She picked up the stack of reports again. Photos of the truck, lab results, everything they had gathered since the seizure. She examined each image of the trailer, trying to see what might have been missed. This wasn't a pointless obsession. It was the kind of unease that anyone who has worked the streets for a long time learns to trust. This time, a small reflection on the trailer's inner wall caught her eye. The gleam of the steel looked different, almost new. It was as if someone had scrubbed it fiercely, erasing any recent trace. There were no fingerprints, not even a scrap of forgotten paper or a scuff mark from cargo being dragged. The forensics report, which had arrived by email around 10, provided the answer. Confirmed use of powerful hospital-grade cleaning agents, of the kind that eliminate even odors and any bacteria. This was far too strange for a common cargo theft. It felt more like a procedure carried out by someone terrified of what might be left behind. From this evidence, a new line of reasoning began to form in Camilla's mind. Thor's sharp instinct, his restlessness and heightened alertness from the very beginning, now made even more sense. The dog never growled without reason. And that day, his focus had been fixed on the trailer doors, as if he knew something important had been there. This wasn't just a disposable clue. It suggested the truck was merely a front. The trailer, treated with almost surgical precision, hinted at something far more serious. Perhaps they hadn't just been moving merchandise. It could have been the illegal transport of something dangerous or forbidden, something that needed to leave the smallest possible trace. Camilla felt she was on the verge of uncovering a much deeper layer of the case. The silence of the clean truck was screaming its secret. She knew the investigation would not end here. With the reports and photos spread across her desk, Camilla traced the truck's official routes over and over, trying to visualize its exact path to the point of interception. She never blindly trusted GPS or travel logs, always believing that the most crucial details escaped those standardized spreadsheets. It was there, while zooming in on an old map, that she noticed a discreet detour, almost masked by major highways. A stop, registered at a time that didn't align with the rest of the journey, appeared on her radar. An old gas station, known by the nickname Pacheco's Post, on the edge of the highway between Uberaba and Uberlundia. It had a bad reputation stretching back to her grandfather's time as an officer. Memories of old cases flashed in her mind. In several investigations, that gas station had been mentioned as a meeting point for people involved in clandestine transport, people who would vanish shortly after patrol cars arrived. It seemed too much of a coincidence. Cross-referencing the information with the truck's tracking data only strengthened her suspicion. This wasn't a routing error or a driver taking a shortcut. The stop wasn't listed on any report, and only someone who knew the stories of the local highways would understand it was more than a simple detour. Without hesitating or waiting for the slow grind of administrative procedures, Camilla pulled on her boots again, put Thor in the passenger seat of her vehicle, and headed for the station. The siren was ready, but she preferred not to draw immediate attention. The night was quiet, and no one seemed to be paying much mind to the discreet hum of her engine on the road. When they arrived, the place's abandonment was deceptive. Behind the broken fuel pumps were fresh tire tracks, plastic packaging strewn everywhere, and even a trail of torn pallets in a corner of the lot. Camila moved cautiously. Thor sniffed the ground and immediately became alert, as if he had found a recent trail, something with a presence, a scent, and a danger. Among the empty boxes, disposable gloves, and scraps of cloth, it was clear that this site had been used for something quick, almost surgical. The clue was undeniable. The station wasn't off the map by accident. Something much larger than a simple robbery or kidnapping had passed through here. Possibly something perishable, perhaps even alive, moved in secret by people who knew how to deceive most, but not the eyes and nose of someone who isn't satisfied with easy answers. Suspecting there was far more hidden at the gas station than its abandoned appearance suggested, Camila keyed her radio and requested immediate backup. The response was swift. In less than half an hour, 2 highway patrol vehicles pulled up, bringing experienced colleagues skilled in detailed searches. The team assembled, each officer aware of the station's dark history. They pulled on gloves, illuminated every corner with powerful flashlights, and formed a silent work party, combing through everything, under the awnings, behind the defunct restrooms, and through the surrounding debris. The search soon yielded results. There, amid crushed boxes and thick dust, they found vials of veterinary sedatives, unused syringes, and others already discarded. There were labels from boxes with recent dates, and even stickers from controlled medications, the kind requiring special authorization. Deeper inside a squalid room, there were signs of something large having been removed in a hurry. Drag marks and biological residue, along with torn plastic and pieces of damp cardboard exuding a strong, strange odor. The impression was clear. Someone had been here a short time ago, removing what seemed to be alive, or at least perishable cargo with great speed and care. Though the scene felt like a revelation, Camila felt the frustration of not having a direct answer about the truck's true cargo. There was no trace of an animal or any living being, only indications that everything had been transferred with precision and at just the right time to leave no clear trail. She felt as if she were always one step behind, chasing a shadow that knew the shortcuts better than she did. With Thor alert to every new scent, Camila paced, mentally reviewing everything she had learned about such operations. The empty trailer was just the tip of the iceberg. Now she saw connections to other abandoned warehouses, routes that rarely appeared on maps, and old arrangements that were never officially recorded. Every detail, every hidden plastic wrapper, and every patched-up box underscored the risk of a single misstep. The network behind this crime was far larger than they had imagined, and any error would allow the masterminds to escape again, or worse, put more innocent lives in danger. In the days that followed, Camila couldn't hide her anxiety as she sifted through recent reports. The documents revealed strikingly similar incidents. Trucks stopped at random locations, their trailers completely clean, sometimes without even the smell of grease, and drivers who always had a vague alibi or lost time during their journey. The routes were repetitive, with identical or very similar detours, and in every case there was that same unsettling void. As much as she tried to compartmentalize the information, she felt she was looking at the pieces of a puzzle far larger and older than she had imagined. Thor's intuition was a constant in every investigation. With each new visit to a suspicious warehouse, he would stop at the door, scent the air, and give Camila an uneasy look. It wasn't just obedience. There was a complicity in his expression, a silent warning that the road still held its secrets and dangers. Thor was never wrong when he sensed something was out of place, and it gave Camila the persistent confidence she needed to continue the search, even when everything seemed to be repeating itself endlessly. And so the pressure mounted. The Highway Patrol's intelligence sector, along with civil police detectives, began working together, cross-referencing names of shell companies, overlapping routes, and reports with altered timelines. After a long drive through the bustling roads of Minas, they finally arrived at an industrial warehouse on the outskirts of Ribeirão das Neves. At first glance, the place was unremarkable, but data cross-referencing had pinpointed it as the very heart of the criminal operation. The raid unfolded on a cloudy morning. Thor was the first to catch a scent at the warehouse door, stopping beside the power box and looking up at Camila, as if asking for permission to advance. Inside, a line of trucks was unloading thermal containers. Tucked away amidst the packaging were illegally imported medicines, unregistered drugs, vast lots of syringes, and other products with their labels scratched off. Officers and health officials swarmed every corner, cataloging everything without a moment's rest. The arrests came next. Drivers, enforcers, and even a warehouse supervisor. Although Camila felt that a major link in the chain had been broken, she knew that much of the truth remained just out of reach. The road, which had demanded so much courage, had returned more questions than answers, as if hiding even more stories beneath its asphalt. The case seemed closed as dusk began to settle. Outside the now sealed warehouse, Camila and Thor stood still for a few moments, away from the bustle of their colleagues and the frantic pace of the forensics team dispatching boxes of illegal medicine for analysis. The road ahead, cut off by yellow tape, stretched out before them, its end swallowed by the darkness, with only the distant pulse of flashing lights to mark the way. Yet there was a strange promise in the way it extended, as if to say that while things might be calm for now, nothing was truly over. Camila felt a quiet joy at seeing the investigation's outcome, but it was a victory that tasted of concern. She knew that crime never truly vanishes. It just changes its route, switches trucks, and disguises its next steps in other warehouses and cold spreadsheets. Thor, lying at her side, seemed to understand this feeling. Though tired, he remained alert to the movement around them, ready to scent any unknown approach. Perhaps that was why, even when justice seemed to be served, Camila never stopped searching. She had learned from the long nights on the road and the different scents in the cargo that a single triumph is almost never the final answer. Weary, she crouched down and ran a hand over Thor's muzzle, pausing to thank him for so many days of unwavering trust. She knew that amidst all the modern tools, the cameras, wiretaps, and computers, nothing surpassed the silent understanding between an officer and her dog. Without Thor, the clues would have remained hidden. It was this bond, so simple and direct, that gave her the courage to carry on, even in the face of so much uncertainty. As the traffic slowly resumed its flow and the sirens faded into the distance, Camila stood up, adjusting her vest. She looked once more at the road, a dark line promising more questions than answers, and felt that this was her true place. As long as there was silence along these routes, there would be buried secrets waiting for a new scent, a new search. And whatever the next challenge might be, Camila knew she could trust the instinct she shared with Thor, because the road never closes its doors to those with the courage to press on.